Hey Garrett, thanks for joining us today on Lincoln Network's first ever webinar. Yeah, to give you all a background of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about Trump's very successful digital email fundraising strategy. To give you sort of a magnitude of the difference between Trump's campaign and Hillary's campaign, 27% of all Trump's donors were small dollar compared to 18% of Hillary's. Despite this disadvantage, Hillary actually outspent Trump 2-1. But in 2012, things were actually flipped. 30% of all Obama's donors were small donors compared to 18% of Romney. So Garrett was actually in the middle of this. I guess there's lots of seismic shifts going on right now in DC, and he's here to tell us about that experience. So take it away, Garrett.
All right, thanks. So I've got a relatively old presentation that I do about online fundraising for the Campaign Management College, which is this school that the RNC runs. So some of the slides are a little bit old, but I think it's just a good starting point about like 100,000-foot level about online fundraising. And then this is like 5 minutes, 4 minutes. I'll cruise through it. And then Aaron, you have questions. I'm sure maybe the audience has questions. All right. And Aaron, are we on text just in case the internet goes out or something?
Yeah, you can shoot me messages if something goes out.
Cool.
So I'll give you, you have presenting privileges now.
Okay. Let's see if that works. Okay. Like I said, can you see that?
So go ahead and walk us through this.
So like I said, there's a couple slides in here that aren't that good and they're old, and we'll skip over those. It's slow, so hold on one sec. So this slide, the entire discussion that we go through today, if you were to learn only one thing about online fundraising, and it was this is a formula that looks extremely simple. This is 100% of the entire strategy of online fundraising is the size of your list times your conversion rate equals money. It has profound implications for how you approach spending money, how you go about raising it, and just the big budget decisions that you make sort of before the campaign, during, and even after it. And so in general, your conversion rate, whether you're a candidate or a committee at any level, is going to be relatively static. You're going to have days it goes up, days it goes down, but a committee's conversion rate is going to be a little bit lower than a candidate's, obviously. We were blessed with Trump to have a very high conversion rate, but still it's relatively static. And so what that means is that the main lever that you have to raise more money is almost exclusively the size of your list. And so this is why it's such a big deal, because the implication of that is that you need to go get as big a list as possible for the best ROI as possible you can get. I know it sounds very simple and straightforward, but if you buy into that and you get your organization to buy into that, it means that you're going to be spending a lot of money to grow that list because it's worthwhile. And the hard part is that it's usually not, it doesn't actually come back to you until like the last 2 months of the election. And so that's kind of what this next slide shows. Again, this is an old slide, and it's actually not very well done. But what it demonstrates is that 50% of all the money you're going to raise online comes in the last 2 months of the election. So that means you're going to go out, 2 years ahead of time when the campaign launches, let's say a year and a half, and you're going to ask for all this money, and you're not going to get a positive return on that money until the last 2 months. So this is a very difficult budgeting question. And online fundraising almost always comes down to budgeting. And my main role in the campaign this year was fighting for budget, getting it, and securing it, and not letting it go. And it's a hard sell to go to the campaign manager, go to the boss and say, I need X millions of dollars, X hundred thousands of dollars. But 50% of the money we make back on this isn't going to come until the last 2 months. So you just got to trust me. It's a tough sell. So we can talk again about that a little bit later. I'm going to cruise through this. This is the strategies of online fundraising. List size times conversion rate equals money is very simple. The tactics that go into it are very complicated, and it's where people get tripped up. In general, you've got a house file, which is the old direct mail term for the emails and the donors that you have in-house. And you've got prospects, and you're trying to make prospects into active donors in your house file. And then there's a whole, on the right side of the slide is the whole prospecting side, where you go out and try to bring in new people through emails. You upsell them, and hopefully they donate, and use that money to go prospect even more. Things like email lead generation, surveys, petitions are a great way to grow this list through advertising. There's also other tactics we can get into. This is just a quick slide. Again, this deck is sort of for a different audience, but just demonstrating that the laws of supply and demand apply for lead gen. So if you're going statewide in Ohio, you might be able to get emails for $1.50, but if you're just focusing around Cincinnati, they're probably going to be $3.50. Again, just a supply and demand thing. So last thing is to focus on this. I would honestly print this out or screen grab it and like sort of have this on hand at all times, because this really is, it has profound implications. If you get the rest of the organization you're in to buy into it, it's going to make your life easier. Okay, so that's it. Aaron, let me see if I can get back to, there we go.
Yeah, there you go. So one of the first things you said, which I thought was interesting, is you said you were blessed with a high conversion rate. So obviously, I think a lot of people, lots of ideas come to mind. So can you tell me a little bit about what you learned in response to messaging and just elaborate on this high conversion rate?
Yeah. So you can have the best tactics and the biggest list and the smartest people, but if people aren't excited about giving to you, you're still not going to raise much money online. And so it's amazing. You've got sort of the perfect foil here with Hillary. I mean, it was very clear that they struggled to raise money online, because the biggest telltale to me is that they were asking for $1, right?
Oh, really?
And they weren't asking for $1. They had some like secret A/B test. They were asking for $1 because that was the lowest entry point that they could get in to pad their numbers, to say that they had a higher percentage of small dollars. So therefore that they could say they had a grassroots movement, when everyone knew those major dollars was funding the campaign. And so the most excitement this cycle was with obviously Bernie Sanders and Trump. And that energy, you can't make magic happen. If the energy is there, you've got to be ready to capture it with the right tactics and tools and people to do it, but you can't just create energy out of nothing. So that's what I'm saying. We were lucky to have a lot of that energy, and but execute very well and be ready to capture the energy.
So you could see that with this $1 email campaign, you're saying that like you could just tell in the numbers that they just weren't, people weren't wanting to give Hillary Clinton $5 to $50, $100.
I'm extrapolating out. I haven't like confirmed this, but I'm just saying, like, we asked for the highest amount that we possibly could.
Yeah.
We sold Art of the Deal books for $184.
Wow, really? Even though you could get it on Amazon for like $10?
Well, they were signed. They were signed.
Okay.
There, but normally you'd sell a campaign book like Walker and other people. And I don't blame them for this, but they would sell usually for like between $65 and $85. And I think when you have that level of energy, people will jump a higher hurdle to get in. So I'm extrapolating out. I certainly don't want to, it's not factual, but I think it says a lot about that they were always asking for $1.
Well, I mean, but it is obvious that if you look at their campaign reporting, right, 18% of all money raised by Hillary of her $1.2 trillion, $1.2 billion that was actually totally spent, including outside groups, I mean, only 18%, came from small dollar, and of that, I mean, Trump was raised half the amount, and almost basically was pretty close to, in nominal terms, raising as much money as Hillary did from small dollars, despite
Yeah.
being down, half.
Yeah. I the numbers don't lie. So
Yeah. So tell me also in your presentation, you said that one of the things that's really important is to get buy-in on, making sure you want to build out a list, all those types of things. Was there can you tell us like how that actually worked in the Trump
yeah.
administration or sorry, Trump campaign?
So, well, I can go back even further to the RNC. So when I got to the RNC in about June of 2015, and there's like, 17 people running for president. So it was very clear that there, whoever won the primary and came out, and again, the RNC's job is just to be, just to build a vehicle, and then that's really powerful and strong and can go really fast. And then whoever wins the primary gets in the vehicle and drives it where they want to go. So we're kind of like a receptacle for that, if you will. And I knew that the digital operations coming out of that divided primary just wasn't going to be very large, and so that we needed to backstop that in order to help them scale into general election size very quickly. And so when they got out of when Trump got out of the primary, we were at about 25 people, and we had made serious investments in building up an email list and an email team, among many other things. But that was really a main focus. And so in the summer of 15, I went to all the rest of the senior staff at the RNC, and we wanted to go to all of them because I was asking for a huge amount of money and it was going to affect everyone. And I asked for 15. We got $12 million, and to go build a list. And one of the ways I would sell it, and I think this works on any size organization, is that I don't know if I'm a political director or if I'm the communications director, if I'm the finance director, I don't know how to get people to do things that I want in my department without email. It's besides the candidate's time and the message. I would argue, I don't know what else is more valuable besides the email list on a campaign these days. GOTV, persuasion, fundraising, getting people to show up to an event, that affects the entire organization. And so what I would do if I'm asking for money on a House campaign or, I don't know, some other organization, is I would go to the political guy, I would go to the comms guy and be like, hey, you should go there with me. And it should be a part of your ask as the political director or the finance director to participate in this email acquisition budget that I'm asking for, because it's going to help you. And that just broadens the base and helps you basically build an internal coalition to get sign off on budget.
Okay. Is there anything that you saw when you first got into the Trump world, around convention time, that you knew that this was going to be different than any other campaign that you've worked on before? Any like signs in the data or things that you saw, the way people were responding to emails, or or did you go to an event and you saw the energy?
Specific one. I mean, we knew right off the bat that it was crazy. I don't remember anything specific until convention week, when and this number includes paid, but it's huge. I think the majority of it is organic reach, but the total reach in convention week of Trump's Facebook page was 176 million people in America.
Wow,
and
that's
that
incredible. Wow.
an absolutely astronomical number that we really couldn't believe. And that scale, I mean, it's bigger than Taylor Swift at that point, right? It's a totally different level. You're reaching the outer bounds of what's like even possible on Facebook almost at that point. And so at that point, we started to get a lot more ideas about how to do. We just got to make the big deal the big deal, and that means that if Facebook can get that much audience, then let's do as much Facebook Live as we possibly can. Let's spend, instead of trying to keep our advertising ROI at like 1.3, 1.4, let's try to spend it down to 1.1, 1.2, and just get more donors in, because the energy is there and we need to just go capture it with as big a net as possible.
Oh, so interesting. So rather than looking at it from you like to almost sought like a little return just to broaden the base of people that you would have.
I'd say I'd say the biggest, the most profound thing I've learned probably on the advertising side, which Gary Kobe and the RNC shop ran for Trump, was um, was that idea. Is that it's the idea is not to get to 2.5x return. If you're getting 2.5x return, you're not spending enough. And the actually the goal is, again, go back to my original slide. It's the size of your list times the conversion rate. And so 2.5x, that means there's probably there's a whole percentage point in there of people that would be donating, but they're not, because you're not spending enough to get into them, and then go after them later for a second donation on email, which is, like, a very easy, cheap platform to get them on. So that whole concept of like your actually is high is a kind of a flip in the logic. But that was a big takeaway of mine.
So on this getting, building the the list size, is there any tactics that y'all saw pretty tried and true that every time you executed upon the tactic to get more emails, it was just always just coming in? Can you tell us some of those?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, not some of this is always going to be apples to oranges, because at a presidential level, you have scale and can push economies of scale onto vendors. And so you get prices and therefore get ROI levels that aren't necessarily possible for a house campaign, for instance. But there's basically two main sources where we got all our emails and donors, and that's email rentals and Facebook advertising. Um, the email rentals, we spent a lot of money on that, and we use one single broker to group all of the lists together, and again, drive an economy of scale and get much steeper discounts than you could if you're approaching it in a piecemeal fashion. And we had multiple, we sent, we probably spent or sent, I don't know, 2 billion emails just on prospecting alone, outside of the 2.5 billion that we sent just in house at the RNC on behalf of the campaign. So on the other thing that we did was on the advertising side. This is where something is, it's very much a new style. The way that Gary was advertising resembles much more a high frequency trader on like a hedge fund would trade, where we would start the day with a couple hundred different pieces of variations of creative, different kinds of videos, you tweak the text, etc. And we had multiple buyers who were competing each day for budget. And so if you were a buyer and I were a buyer and you did better today, then at 3 a.m. tonight, the API splitter in Facebook would give you more budget tomorrow than I would, which would incentivize me to pick up my game tomorrow and try to win back that budget. And so we had a very competitive buying process that encouraged people to make tens of thousands of variations every day. And so we ultimately ended up spending about 200,000 to 300,000 on Facebook, which is trying to get someone to donate or give you an email. And that equated to 40 to 60,000 different ad combinations a day. We peaked out one day. We raised over 1.5 million in one day, and I had over 175,000 different ad combinations. And again, the high frequency trading aspect of this is that we weren't waiting for someone to go all the way down the funnel and make a donation or give us an email or not. We were making optimization calls every 5 minutes through all these different buying teams that we had, based on how much engagement that ad was getting, whether it's being viewed or stopped and viewed when you're scrolling through it, or liked or shared or commented. And that was just a very early indication that we could say that this ad isn't working well, so get us a new one. And that's how you get up to 40 to 60,000 different combinations every day. So that is a whole new ballgame of ad buying at a sort of scale and volume that I think is probably applicable at the lower levels, or not at the lower levels, but just down ballot. A radical departure from sort of traditional ad buying on that front.
So I think this cycle highlighted lots of non-traditional things on both sides, right? You had a outspoken socialist run on the Democratic side, and we had a billionaire media mogul run on the right side,
Yeah.
and so this kind of trickled down into a lot of the email marketing. I remember one email was sent out, it was like, because Trump is wealthy, he did a matching grant, right, which was
Yeah.
pretty. I don't remember any presidential candidate ever doing that. Is there any other asks that you sent out in email marketing that were really unique, that just like a great storytell that you would want to share?
Um, I'm trying to think honestly of something new that we did. I got to be honest. I don't think there was a ton of new stuff. It's probably variations on a theme. Um, I think uh, the direct mail guys have been doing this for 30 or 40 years, and they've basically figured out every tactic there is. And now it's just the online guys are sort of can iterate on it all faster. So I've just got a message that the feed cut out. Are you still there?
Yeah, he's still here.
Okay. So, you know, again, it's sort of like the energy and the story. The I'll match you email, which is what you're referring to. That's an old story, but people know that he's actually got the money and was actually putting in like $2 to $3 million every month. So it's very real because it is real. And it's very, I think, tangible to people that, this wealthy businessman was going to match what they were doing. And they felt that buy-in. He was going to put in and they were going to put in. And that's just a very real connection that I think pushed that energy over the top and made people want to donate. So I don't want. I wish I had a sexy answer that we had something totally new on the copy front, but it's consistent, creative variations on a theme, which is not easy to do every day. That Parks Bennett and Russ and Kevin and Jenny and all these guys at the RNC helped execute on.
Cool. So let's get into some email tooling and just general, like, how the day-to-day actually worked inside of the campaign. So what did y'all use to send out your emails to create the creative? And what do you want to highlight in the email fundraising process?
I mean, it's a pretty unsexy process. It's the 90% of the iceberg that's underwater that no one can really see. The RNC up an investment had multiple different ESPs, email service providers, to be able to, if we were having delivery trouble, we could go and use a different provider to still get out the number of emails we needed to get out that day. We use a company called Selligent to send the vast majority of the emails. I think they do work for Yahoo. In terms of the ESP, like which ESP is best, I mean, I feel like I switched like 10 months. The grass is greener. I don't really have a super sexy answer to that. I think it's whatever works for your organization as a price point and based on the feature set that you need and how complex you need that to be. My recommendation for everyone is to bite the bullet as best you can and go get a CRM that your email service system can live on top of, just because it's a much cleaner solution and long-term benefit for you.
Okay. What about metrics? What did you wake up and look at every day during the campaign?
We had an hourly fundraising count. Every hour I would get a Slack message and and that was a really easy way overnight for me to quickly look at when I woke up to see where we were and what kind of day it might turn into by 9 or 10 a.m. And the basic stats of what kind of lists you're going to send to your prospecting, what your ROI is on the advertising. I mean, all that adds up to having enough emails to capture big moments, which is what, I was principally focused on from my position, making sure that days when he was going to be in the news, that we had all the inventory for prospecting that we had, that the lists had all the content and email copy it needed to send to multiple different times to capture a big moment. because those are the days when we raise $6, $8, $9 million in a single day, and that just transforms the month when you're able to raise that much money. Every day we're looking at trying to raise about 1.5 million overall, and so if we're off pace on that for 2 days, then I would dip in and try to figure out if there's a program that we need to start to sell new hats, or to sell a donor wall, or to do a matching gift, whatever it is, and try to make sure that those programs were getting approved, and the budget was there to execute well on those programs.
Do you have any insights into whenever you would start sending to a particular person that you knew, that let's say you onboarded and you got someone's new email or you got a new list, was there anything in the data that would point to you that this person's going to be a very valuable donor or activist for the Trump campaign, or any other indicators that say, okay, this person's not going to be, we just need to stop focusing on them, stop sending them emails?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, if someone comes in on an ad and donates, like, that's a motivated person. And so, they would go into like the active portion of the email file, where they would be getting like a lot of traditional asks, and hopefully we turn them around into a second and a third gift, and we'd be tracking the gift frequency. If someone comes in on email and they don't, open an email ever, or once in every 2 months, it starts to be a drag on your deliverability, and you want to just try to filter those people out, and keep a sort of an engaged list. So the signs are pretty telltale. Like, if no one is opening emails, then you want to cut them out and try to maybe put them on Facebook as a custom audience, and try to get them to re-engage into your list through another ad, or leave them off for 6 months and come back with a really good end of year ask that's like your home run ask that always works for you. I think people are probably, I said earlier, like, the size of your list is the number one thing, but the quality of the list also matters. And so if you've got a bunch of junk on your list, but it's a huge list, that's not necessarily a great thing. It needs to be a huge list, as big a list as possible, but as quality a list as possible as well.
So the last set of questions before we get to some audience submitted questions, pulling back to all of the chaos of 2016, what was the one thing that actually surprised you, since you worked at the RNC from primary to now president-elect? What's that one thing that you would share with people as like your war memory?
The convention week was a wild week that came together really late. I mean, there's this whole organization, I can't remember the name of it. The acronym is COA, Committee on Arrangements, and they actually run the convention. But Trump didn't show up till pretty late, and so things were kind of scrambled to put together because they wanted to make some changes, yada yada. I ended up in this at the convention with Scavino and Parscale, sort of helping coordinate all this content production and posting to social media. And it was just the three of us plus the whole COA team out in like a trailer outside the stadium. That was a pretty wild experience. There's a lot of like interesting people in that box. Had a good view of the stadium. That was probably just a wild convention week. Would go home every night exhausted. Didn't really get to go out much, but it was fun. It was got to be kind of have a front seat to the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was at convention as well, and it was, although from our side it didn't seem, as chaotic as you describe it, but it was definitely a once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah.
To be at convention.
It looks all scripted. It doesn't always that way on the inside, but.
What's the one lesson that you added to your campaign strategist, playbook in 2016 that's brand new?
Well, I would say two things. I think the need to like nitpick over every little period and comma on every tweet and press release and piece of content you make is ridiculous, and it slows the campaigns down dramatically. And I think you saw that in the primary with something would happen in the news, Trump would tweet about it in 20 minutes, and the rest of the campaigns had like a polished press release out in anywhere from 6 to 12 hours. And it just doesn't work like that anymore. And then he would own that evening's cable news cycle, and the rest of them would like barely get in the morning shows. And so the speed kills. And I think organizations have got to release a lot more rein to the people who are basically digital people in control of these platforms, and allow them to make more decisions faster at the ground level. The second big thing I would take away is how much more aggressive we can be on online advertising, particularly on Facebook. There's a level of advertising that's never been done before in politics that we were doing that I think is replicable at down ballot races. And I think, over the next few months, we're going to hopefully teach a lot of people about how to do that and benefit the party at all levels.
So one of the submitted questions, which I find super interesting, is, and we don't have any data, there's no public data on this, is like, do you have any rough percentages on what y'all spend on digital grassroots mobilization or digital fundraising compared to TV or traditional direct mail?
So I'm told, and I believe this is true, that in terms of money spent online and money spent on TV, that it was 50-50. Now, not all of this online spend was strictly persuasion, which would be apples to oranges, right? However, the scale, like I said earlier, we're spending $200,000 to $300,000 a day in direct response on Facebook. Now, what we found is that all you needed was people to stop scrolling on their phone to get them to view the ad and to click to donate. A lot of the time, that ad was a persuasion ad. But the text on it was like, buy a new hat here or donate, be on the donor wall or whatever. So is that not a persuasion ad, or is that a direct response ad? I think I would call that something new called direct persuasion, and it's a mix. And so I do think it's more apples to apples than maybe I want to admit. So about 50-50. I think we spent, 30 million renting lists and probably 30 or 40 million on Facebook and other advertising. That could be a lot more. I actually need to update those numbers, but it was a big spend. You got to, at the national scale, you got to spend money to make money. And if you do it right, you can get a great return.
Just briefly, because some people may not know the difference between direct response and persuasion, can you just outline that?
Yeah. So direct persuasion advertising is like what you see on TV, like Aaron Jin for Senate is the greatest man ever, and he's going to vote this way, and that's why you should vote for him. Please vote for him.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Running in 2036. Thanks.
Oh, good. And a direct response ad is like, donate now to Aaron Jin for Senate, or sign up for Aaron Jin's email to get updates. That's you're getting a direct response from the ad, not necessarily just persuading the ad.
I think it's, in the data I have on Obama's 2012 campaign, I found online that it was like 70% this is from the guy who worked on the digital team, was spent on some sort of digital related advertising spend or fundraising. And what I remember from 2012 from the Romney, it was more in the 30s to 40s, like either high 30s range. So I think that regardless, that it's very apparent that the Trump campaign spent a lot more on digital because, like you said, you reached 170 million people on Facebook during convention, which is pretty.
Yeah, I mean, this was a group that during the primary, I think, found huge success online. And so they didn't question too much doing a lot of spend and spending a lot of resources, monetary and otherwise, online during the general. And so that was lucky to some degree. But it's definitely a lesson that I think we got to turn the corner on this whole media mix debate, and it's got to be much more even footing, even at down ballot races, I think.
So you found that because you've worked on a lot of campaigns and you're an expert in this space. Uh, did you find the Trump campaign much more open to online strategies? Because before we both worked on the 2012 cycle. Like it was more like we had to convince people this was important.
Yeah, the benefit of them having a very small campaign was that um, Parscale and I mean Trump himself, they use all these tools. So it wasn't that hard because they already used it and had found success. I mean, Trump is the first social media candidate. Obama, he hired smart people to do it, and that was a smart choice, but he didn't do it, and he doesn't know anything about it. Trump knows very how powerful Twitter is. He knows all about it. He asks a lot of questions about it. Um, he's the first social media candidate. So when the top guy, when the candidate himself or herself is involved in this stuff, yeah, it's easier to make an argument that we should be doing more online.
I think that's a really good point. Something I've highlighted in other interviews and in writing that 2012 and 2008 was more, you could say, like a Web 1.0 version of politics. And Obama, like you said, hired a lot of people who were very good at technology, and he leveraged that. But he himself didn't really change. He just changed like the way he was sharing his message. And Trump sort of is like the full. It's like Web 2.0. It's like Facebook, right? What that did to Web 1.0, he completely changed everything about the mode and the means and everything in the message for the internet. Like it was much more of a cohesive idea than 2012 and 2008 was. It was still like he was digitally enabled versus I feel like Trump is a digital native.
Yeah, I think you nail on the head. I mean, we've just it's progressed to a point where the money and the persuasion and everything. There's not a single department in any campaign that doesn't need the internet to do its job. Big shift from 8 years ago.
One of the questions that came in from the audience is most people work on a much smaller scale, obviously. So they're either the lone person running email fundraising, or they have one or
Right.
two people working on this. What do you recommend to smaller teams?
So what I always say to smaller teams is, I said earlier, you've got to get a coalition built to get budget, and there's a lot of ways to scrape together lists for free or almost free. List is going to dictate the money you raise. Always comes in in the last 2 months, and that's not, that's not a theory. That's a practice that happens every single year. And so you can be confident and know that money is going to come in then. So you got to have that budget fight. But the second thing is, yes, at a much smaller organization, it's like this stupid phrase, but I say like you got to put the face paint on. You've got to get really creative, and you've got to make it a metric for the entire organization, from the candidate on down to the intern. Has got to be responsible for collecting X amount of emails every week or month. If that's the case, if everyone has a metric attached to their success, then they start to get really creative about it. They make sure that they never go to an event without an iPad. They're signing up people in the line at Starbucks every day. And that's one way to hack it, where you put the face paint on, so to speak, and really try to hack getting a bigger list together. Advertising and renting lists is just definitely the easiest, the fastest way, I would say. But it's hard. I'm not going to lie. It's definitely harder at a smaller scale.
Some of the people in the audience don't work on campaigns that work in the C3 world,
Yeah.
in the nonprofit world. So what would you take from your experience at this cycle and share with them as they have similar goals in
Yeah.
doing grassroots fundraising, but have a probably much longer horizon around that, like rather than
Yeah.
like there's no election day.
Right. So that's the key point. Is like one huge advantage that people don't put their finger on in politics enough is that there's an election every 2 years, and if there's not, we got a much bigger problem. And so you can bank on that very specifically, because I know that this thing is going to happen. This big urgent moment is going to happen, and so urgency is. And so if you're a C4, C3, and you don't necessarily have deadlines, you've got maybe monthly that you can create, or you certainly got a yearly deadline. You've got to sort of invent urgency. And I think you've got to invent urgency. So you've got to raise this amount, everyone feels a deadline. Remember turning in your paper in college, whatever, like that's an urgent thing. But you've also, I think if I was at a seed 3, I would work very carefully to demonstrate what the value proposition is. Make sure that people really understand where this money is going to and why that's a benefit. And you've got to continually sell them on the benefits that their money are having. And in the process, build a recurring donor pool. Because if you have a recurring donor pool, it's predictable revenue that you can project forward 15, 18 months and say, I know at the very least I'm going to have this much revenue. And so therefore I can make this amount of investment in growing the list over the next 10 months. And that'll turn into this amount of recurring revenue over the next 15 or 20 months. So that recurring is a big piece, and you've got to work. That's sort of the bottom of the funnel of beneath value proposition and urgency, I would say.
In your fundraising strategies, how much was just pure give money for no, buying a hat or buying a book for the art of the deal? Do you have any guess on what the differences were? Were all of them, for example, were most of, let's say, the $200 donations for people who bought the book, or do most people just give money without any sort of item in return?
A lot of people, definitely the majority of people gave money without some specific item in return. But they knew that they were getting their name on a wall, or they were trying to think of all the programs we had now. They were an end of month donor, or they were, the first. So there's an exchange. There's always an exchange, right? You get your name here, or you get the satisfaction of knowing that you're helping us in a critical period. But there's always an exchange. And even with the petitions, I would say 90% of all the emails we sent were direct asks, either selling something or asking you to donate. The 10% that wasn't were petitions and surveys. It's what I call a hidden ask. You click on a petition, you sign that petition, or you take that survey. After you're done with the petition or survey, you get bounced to a donate page that asks you to take the next step or to continue funding the movement or whatever. It's still an ask email, even though there isn't an ask in the email. It's a hidden ask. Sort of backs up to a rule that, you never send an email without something to click on, and almost every funnel should end at a donate page. You don't want to be wasting people's energy and not be able to capture it with a donate page at the end.
So, personal question I have: were Trump impersonations banned inside of the campaign?
Oh no, encouraged.
Encouraged. Really encouraged. Wow, that's awesome.
Tough to do that.
Pardon?
It's tough to pull off well, though. So.
Yeah, that is true. Is there anything you want to highlight before we close out?
I don't know. It was so easy with you propping me up with questions. I think honestly, I know I probably sound like a dead horse on this, but the formula at the beginning, the size of your list times your conversion rate, if you buy into that and you get other people, it starts a domino reaction of getting investment and understanding that growing the list is important through paid or non-paid means. And I just think that it's a lot of people end up treating online fundraising like it's some black magic. The strategy is very simple. It's list times conversion rate. The tactics are where it gets complicated, but you got to start with that good strategy and explain it and build a coalition internally to get it done.
Okay.
So,
well, thanks for joining us, Garrett. This is Garrett Lansing, CDO of the RNC, Aaron Jin, co-founder of Lincoln Network, on an inside look at Trump's email fundraising operation. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me. See ya.